Hello and good day. Today in Pre-Algebra, we'll be doing CO4, which is ordering rational numbers, as well as identifying opposites and absolute values. No doubt you've heard the word opposite before. We all have opposite day, right? And you've probably heard the term absolute value. But let's go ahead and start by defining them. When we talk about numbers in the mathematical sense, what are opposite numbers? Give me an example, maybe, if you don't necessarily know the definition. Yeah. Negatives are opposite from positives, right? So give me an example of a pair of opposite numbers. Aiden?
12 and negative 12.
12 and negative 12 would be opposites. Okay. Give me another example. 15 and negative 15. Yes. 7 and negative 7. And what makes each of those opposite numbers is that they are the same distance away from 0. Right? Numbers that are opposites are the same distance away from 0. 7 and negative 7 are both 7 away from 0. 12 and negative 12 are both 12 away from 0. So opposites are numbers that are the same distance from 0. And we have the examples of 7, negative 7, 12, negative 12. Those are semicolons, by the way, not like the calibration on this thing. Whew. Okay. 7, semicolon, negative 7, 12, semicolon, negative 12. Those are examples of opposites, right? Both numbers are the same distance away from 0. One being positive, one being negative. How about absolute value?
Like the value?
Yes. The absolute, for sure, value. Not quite. Not quite. A number's absolute value is the distance away from 0. So we have some similarity here between the definition of opposite numbers and the definition of absolute value. Opposites are just numbers that are the same distance, but a number's absolute value is its distance away from 0. And the key word here in this definition is distance, because what can a distance not be? What can a distance not be? Negative, right? When you pull out a ruler, is there any negative values there? No. It starts at 0 and counts up. You can't have a negative length, right? If you put your car in reverse and drive backwards, does your odometer count backwards? Do the miles decrease on the car? No, they still count up. Even though you are driving backwards, you're still driving a positive distance. If I walk backwards, I'm still walking a positive distance. I'm just doing it backwards. So when we talk about a number's absolute value, the absolute value of a number is always positive. The absolute value of a number is always positive because a distance, which an absolute value defines, a distance cannot be negative. All right? So what we're going to do is we're going to start focusing on the points that I've labeled on this number line here, points A through F. And we are going to write each point's opposite. That's what the O is for there. And each point's absolute value. That's what the AV stands for there. So point A, okay, circle it in red. Point A is right here. It's labeled at negative 5. What's the opposite of negative 5? Or another way to say that is, what number is the same distance as negative 5 is from 0? G? Positive 5. Okay. What is the absolute value of negative 5? How far is negative 5 from 0? 5. So in this case, both the opposite and the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. All right. Let's look at point B. Point B is right here. What's the value of point B? What's the value of point B, Connor? Negative 2.5. It's halfway between negative 2 and negative 3, so negative 2.5. And what is the opposite of negative 2.5? What number is the same distance from 0 as negative 2.5? Yes. Positive 2.5. And then what's the absolute value of negative 2.5? How far away from 0 is negative 2.5? 2.5. So again, in this case, we see that the opposite value and the absolute value of negative 2.5 ends up being the same thing. Okay? Let's jump over to point D. Now we're on the positive side of 0. We're at positive 1. What is the opposite of positive 1? Anybody? Yeah. Negative 1. So in this case, our opposite value is going to be negative, right? Because our original value is on the positive side, so the opposite of that is going to be negative. However, what do we know about the absolute value of positive 1? How far is it from 0? Connor? Oh. How far is 1 from 0? 1. So even though our opposite's negative, our absolute value is still positive because it will always be positive. It is referring to a distance. How far is it from 0? Okay. So go ahead and complete letters C, E, and F. I'll give you about 30, 45 seconds to do so, and then we'll see how we do. Okay. And we're back. Point C, label that here. Point C is at negative 2. The opposite of negative 2, you should have positive 2. And that is the same for the absolute value. Negative 2 is a distance of 2 away from 0. So 2 and 2 for that one. Point E. What's the value of point E? What's the value of point E? It's not an integer. It's not right on a number. Yeah. 2.5. So the opposite of positive 2.5 is actually where point B is here. The opposite is negative 2.5. The absolute value is positive 2.5. So points B and E have a relationship, right? And that they are opposites themselves. They're the same distance away from 0, and that distance is their absolute value, 2.5. Okay. Finally, point F. It's at 3.5, so the opposite of 3.5 is negative 3.5, and the absolute value is positive 3.5. Questions on that? Doing okay? All right. Because the next set of values, this is where you get to impress me with your knowledge here. G through P, see if I can fit them all on here. Perfect. G through P are not plotted for you. So you need to plot the points on the number line provided, write the opposite of the given value, and then the absolute value of the given value. So let's start with point G here. Okay. Point G is at 1 2/3. So being a mixed number, we know it's going to be between 1 and 2, right? It's more than 1, but not quite 2 wholes. So it's between 1 and 2. 1 2/3 is going to be approximately right here. And so we can write point G up above there. What is the opposite of point G? Probably my agent. Text me. Yeah. What's the opposite of point G? What number is the same distance from 0 than positive 1 2/3? Negative 1 2/3. Okay? Opposites just have to do with what number is the same distance on the other side of 0. And the absolute value, how far away is 1 2/3 from 0? It is 1 2/3 away from 0. Okay? So just remember that absolute value will always be positive. The opposite is what number on the other side of 0 is the same distance. Okay? Pick another letter you'd like to do. H through P. What would you like? Yeah. I. 9/2. What's the value of 9/2? This one requires a little bit of conversion first, right? What two integers will 9/2 be between? Is it between 0 and 1, 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 5? Where's the fall? Yeah. Sorry? 4. It's equal to 4? Or it's... It'll be between 4 and 5. What is the mixed number value of 9/2? The mixed number value of 9/2. Yeah. 4.5. 2 goes into 9 4 whole times with 1/2 left over. Right? 2 goes into 9 4 whole times. That's 8/2. We have 9/2, so 1/2 left over. It's equivalent to 4.5. So point I is going to be over here at 4.5. And then you can take the opposite and the absolute value from there. What number is the same distance from 0 as positive 4.5? And then how far is 4.5 from 0? Another one that maybe looks a little bit confuzzling. Yes?
Negative 25.
Which letter are you talking about? K? Okay. Negative 0.25. Negative 0.25. What's the fraction value? Like already tying back here to CO3. What's the fraction value of 0.25? Negative 25 hundredths is where we might start, right? Put that decimal over 100. And then what does negative 25 hundredths simplify to? Negative 1/4, exactly. Divide both by 25, bring it down, negative 1/4. So what we're plotting here is negative 1/4. It's going to be on the negative side of 0. It's going to be 1/4 of the way between 0 and negative 1. That's going to be point K. All right? 1/4 of the way between 0 and negative 1. And then from there, the opposite of negative 1/4 is positive 1/4, and you can write it as positive 0.25 or positive 1/4, fraction, decimal value, either way is fine. Then the absolute value, how far away is negative 0.25 from 0? It is 0.25 away from 0. Again, that absolute value, always positive. All right, we will have you take a look at the rest of them. I do have a cautionary tale here. Just remember, the negative side of 0, you don't use it quite as much, so it's a little bit more unfamiliar. But a number like we have in letter J here, negative 4.1, which side of negative 4 is negative 4.1 going to be? Is negative 4.1 going to be on the left side, or is negative 4.1 going to be on the right side of negative 4? The left, right? Because it's beyond negative 4. It's negative 4 and then a 0.1. The dot on the right here is actually at negative 3.9, approximately, right? It's not quite to negative 4. So just make sure that you are putting your points on the correct side of whichever integer it's closest to. Yes? Yes, everything G through P, you need to plot. You might want to start writing your points down below the number line if you kind of run out of space or it gets too crowded up above there. That's perfectly fine. But yes, G through P need to be plotted, the opposite written, and the absolute value written. Other questions, comments, concerns, complaints, compliments, congratulations, or criticisms? Yes.
So is I
Yes, I is 4.5 or 4.5. I know. Yeah. Yeah. What you're going to say. Yeah. That was intentional. So just put 1 point above and 1 point below. Are you asking about point L?
no, for I.
What about point I?
Is the answer for
For its value or for the opposite and absolute value? Well, if point I is at 4.5, what's the opposite of positive 4.5? Negative 4.5, right? And you can write negative 4.5 or negative 9/2. Either way is fine. But yeah, this was just to kind of get the equivalent value of it, so we could plot it easier. But yeah, once you get there, the opposite is just the same number on the other side of 0. And then what's the absolute value of 4.5? How far from 4.5, or how far from 0 is 4.5? 4.5, right? So that would be your absolute value. Okay? All right, folks, the rest of the page is homework for you, and that is how you math.